let's do a practical example with the while loop construct. And for this example, we're going to do what we call data validation for a valid range. An example like that could be where a program, while it's running, might ask the user to enter a value from 1 to 10 to continue on with the program. So let's say you entered 0, you entered 11, any value out of that range, then you will remain in that loop until you enter the appropriate value before you get out of the loop. So the loop will keep you in place until you put in a valid number within the valid range. So this is a really good example on some sort of data validation for data entry. So let's suppose we want to enter a number. Let's call int num, right? And whatever you do with it, so cout, and cin num. All right, so it's quick review here. Cout, you entered num and l. All right, so let's see how this behaves, right? And let's compile and run this for a minute. Compile and run. Okay, I didn't save it. This is example 29. Okay, let's see here. So let me see. What did I do? Forgot to put an L right there. Very good. So compile and run again. Okay. And this will simply print whatever you enter. It doesn't matter what value it is, as long as it's an integer. Let's make this a little bigger. Let's enter 36, fine. Okay, so if I enter 2, you enter 2, right? If we run this again, and let's say I enter -1, then you will get -1. But now let's suppose the valid values that you can enter are only and include 1 through 10. So how are you going to handle this? Well, to do this, we could do several things. We could create a loop that will keep us in place as long as you enter a value that is out of range. So if I'm going to do a while loop, so it's probably a good idea to start priming. So num equals 0. So I know the value 0 is out of range. Then create my while loop here. So while num is less than 1, or num is greater than 10, then open curly brace, we're going to include this in the body of the while loop. Now let's see what happens when you do something like this. So this here is the condition, and this here is your loop control. All right, so we have all of our 3 elements. The first one being the loop priming. So this forces us to go in the loop. The fact that it is 0, that means one of the items here is true. 0 is less than 1. This is an OR statement, so you only need one or the other. Could I have put in 11 here? Yeah, sure. Any value outside this range between 1 and 10 will have allowed me to prime this condition to be true. And now it's just a matter of entering a value. So the only time I'm going to get out of this loop is if I enter a value that is greater than 1. Let's see here. I made a mistake here. No, that's correct. All right, so let's go ahead and try it. Compile and run. I must have just compiled. Let's compile and run. And in my case, just run. So let's say I entered a value of 0. So that's going to keep me in there. Let's say I entered a value of 4. That's going to kick me out. You entered 4. So let's run it again. And let's say I entered 11. That's going to keep me in there. 12. That's going to keep me in there. -1. That's going to keep me in there. Because these are invalid values. How about 10? 10 is valid. And then the program continues. Or whatever it's supposed to do. Let's do it again. Run it again. So let's try to understand what that condition is. So if I enter any value that's less than 1, let's say I enter 0, I'm there. -1, I'm there. -10, I'm there. Any value greater than 10 keeps me in the loop. 11, I'm there. 12, I'm there. 13, I'm there. Now let's put 5, which is right in the middle of the range, the valid range. And I'm out of the loop. You entered 5, which is a valid value to continue with your program, whatever you were supposed to be doing, as you go down after the while loop. So the while loop will hold you in there, right? As long as you enter an invalid value. So this is great for input validation to make sure you're within a certain range. Okay? Let's do another example. And this time we're going to do a counter. So we kind of did the same thing last time, but, so let me just copy this, just here. But we did 2 separate variables. So let me just copy this quickly so I don't have to write a whole bunch of code here. Paste. We're going to call this one 30. And in this case, we're going to do up and down counters example. So we're going to print a count. So let me just clean up this. All right. And let's say we have int count equals 0. So we prime our count to be 0. Now we want to print the count as it increments within a loop. And how far do you want to go? We want to go from 10 counts from 0 to 9. So we could do something like this. While count is less than 9, then we could do a couple things here. 1, cout count equals, so you can actually print the count, and that would be count and L. And then make sure you increment the count. This here will be your loop control. Without it, you're going to remain in the loop. So, this here, prime the loop. And this here, evaluate the condition. So these are your 3 elements for a while loop. So you have to have these 3 for a proper while loop. Let's see how this behaves. So let me compile and run here. It's going to ask me to save this, example 30.cpp. And let's see. Missing a curly brace here. I must have deleted that while I copied and pasted. Compile and run. Okay, fantastic. As you can see, it counted from 0 to 8. Oh, okay, I did less than 9. So let me adjust that. Now, if you want to include 9, you could do something like this. Let me just fix this for a second. If you want to include 9, you can say less or equal to 9. Let's see how that behaves. Okay, that will include the 9. Okay, because 9, the condition will still be true. Now, if you want to do an exclusive, like less than, then if you want to do 10 counts, put 10 here. And let's see, we get the same result. So compile and run. And sure enough, you get 0 through 9. Now remember, by the time you get out, let's see what the count is. So let's print what the count value, cout, after the loop. So a lot of people might be curious to know how did we get out? So count and L. Okay, so let's run this again, compile and run. You could see that it reached 10. 10 definitely is not less than 10. That is the value that got you kicked out of the loop. All right, so can we use that value to print down or to count down? Let's say from 10 to 1 if you want to, right? So we could do something like this. We could do cout. We could say here, this is the first loop. I'm sorry, here we could do while count is greater than 0. Okay? We could do cout, count equals count and L. And this time you will decrement the counter. So count equals count minus 1. That's how you're going to control the loop, the while loop. So let's see how this behaves. So compile and run. And there you have it. So this one goes from 10 to 1. Okay? Now let's suppose you wanted to go from 9 to 0. Okay? So if you wanted to do something like this, you could say greater or equal to 0, but before you do anything, reduce your count by 1 already. Or, here's another way. Take this one, cut, subtract 1 from the count right here. Let's see how this works. Compile and run. So the order in which you're going to do things, notice I've got a minus 1. We can get rid of that as long as it's greater than 0 in our case, because guess what? By the time it's minus 1, you're here in the loop. You're still in the loop. So we're still going to be doing this to include the 0 actually right here, because 0 will be your last count. So compile and run. And sure enough, this goes from 9 to 0. Okay? We know internally the count went to minus 1. That's how you were able to get out. As a matter of fact, if you want to make sure, cout, the count value after the second loop, let's put a quote here again, and then go ahead and print count and L. Now let's see how this behaves again, because that is what got you out. Compile and run. Okay, and notice in our case 0. Okay, so 0 is not equal to 0. I mean 0 is not greater than 0, I'm sorry, and that got you out. Okay, so I hope you learned a lot from this, and what we're going to do next is we're going to investigate the do while loop.